Section 25 of Astonishing Stories 16, April 1931. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Betty B. Astounding Stories 16, April 1931. The Reader's Corner. A meeting place for readers of Astounding Stories. Now in book form. Readers of Astounding Stories will be interested to hear that two of the continued novels which appeared in our pages during last year are coming out in book form. The first of these is Murder Madness by Murray Leinster. It is due sometime in February, so by the time this issue is on the newsstands, it will no doubt be already out. The publishers are Brewer and Warren, and the price is $2. Here's your chance, collectors, and those who missed an installment or two. The other book is Brigands of the Moon by everyone knows Ray Cummings. It should be coming along in a month or so. Watch out for it. Mr. Cummings sits in. Dear Editor, thank you for the opportunity to address our readers on certain sidelights of my tale, The Exile of Time. I particularly welcome it, for the theme of time traveling is, I think, the most interesting of any upon which I have written. Some of you will no doubt recall my stories, The Man Who Mastered Time and The Shadow Girl. In The Exile of Time, I present the third of the trilogy. It has no fictional connection with the others. It is in no sense a sequel, but rather a companion story. To write about time traveling is for me a difficult but fascinating task. The opportunities are endless, and I hope you may think I have taken advantage of them with a measure of success. I wrote those conceptions of time and space and the great cosmos, which you will find in the text of the story, because I feel them very deeply. Each occasion upon which circumstances allow me to present my theories, I eagerly welcome. How much of the conception is original with me, I cannot say. It is the product of my groping interpretation of the theories of many brilliant scientific minds of today, humbly combined with perhaps some originality of my own. The mind flings far afield when it starts to grope with the unknown. Try it. Read what I have written, and then let your mind roam a little further. Probe a little deeper. Perhaps we may contribute something. It is only by that process, each mind following some other's cleared path and pushing forward a little on his own, that the unknown can be pierced. When once you admit the basic idea of time traveling to be plausible, what fascinating vistas are opened to the imagination. Space is so crowded. The room in which you are now sitting as you read these words, just think what that space around you has held in the past, and will hold in the future. You occupy it now, playing out your little part, but think what has happened where you are now sitting so calmly reading. What tumultuous crowding events. Your room is quiet now, but its space has rung with war cries. The ground under you has been drenched with blood, and further back it was lush with primeval jungle. And in another age it was frozen beneath a great ice cap, and before that it blazed, molten with fire. Back to the beginning. And your little space in the future? It will be in the heart of a great mechanical city, perhaps. A mechanical servant may murder his human master in the space which you now call your room. The great revolt of the mechanisms may start in your room. I think that your room will some day again be shrouded under a forest growth. The mechanical city will be neglected, tumbled into ruins, buried beneath the silt of the passing centuries. The sun will slowly rise, a giant dull red ball, burning out, cooling. And the earth will cool. Humans perhaps will have passed decadence and reverted to savagery. Perhaps the polar ice caps will again come down, and ice slowly cover the dying world. All nature will be struggling and dying, with the sun a red ball turning dark like a cooling ember. Millions of centuries, with whatever events, who am I to say? But it will go on to the end. That's a long way from the beginning, isn't it? And yet ours is only a tiny planet living briefly in the great cosmos of time and space. A segment of everything that ever was and ever will be marches through the space of your room. What an enormously thronged little space. There is only time to keep consecutive and orderly the myriad events which in your room are pushing and jostling one another. I say then, time is what keeps everything from happening at once. It seems a good definition. I do hope you like The Exile of Time. The writing of it made me realize how unimportant I am. A human lifetime is really as brief as the flash of an electric spark. The whole lifetime of our Earth is not much more than that. Stars, worlds are born, live and die, and the great cosmos goes majestically on. Yet some people seem to feel that they and the space they occupy in this time they call the present are the most important things that ever were or ever will be in the whole universe. It is a good thing to realize that that isn't so. Ray Cummings. Likes. Dear Editor, starting with the August issue, I am going to give my opinion of the stories. The Planet of Dread by R.F. Starzl couldn't have been better. Get more stories by him. Murder Madness by Murray Leinster was a good story, but it didn't belong in a science fiction magazine. The Terrible Tentacles of L472, a good story. The Invisible Death, a very good story. Prisoners on the Electron, very good. The Eight Men of Xlotli, a good story, but it does not belong in a science fiction magazine. The Pirate Planet, very excellent, much more so because it is an interplanetary story. Vagabonds of Space, The Fifth Dimension Catapult, The Gate of Xoran, The Dark Side of Antri, all good. Well, I guess I will sign off and give somebody else a chance to broadcast. William McCalvey, 1244 Beach Street, St. Paul, Minnesota. I do, I don't. Dear Editor, I like the magazine the way it is. I want a larger magazine. I want a magazine twice a month. I want a quarterly, and so do I. There is a terrible flaw in one of the stories. All of the stories are flawless. I want reprints. I don't. I like Ray Cummings. I don't. I want a better grade paper. The paper's okay with me. I want smooth edges on the magazine. So do I. And so do I. These seem to be the most often repeated sentences in the letters from readers. However, I have a new one to add. I would like to see an answer by the editor to each letter that is printed in The Reader's Corner. Like this. I liked an extra man, etc. Mr. Science Fiction. I am very glad to hear that you like this little masterpiece, etc. Editor. Why not? The illustration on the cover of the January issue surely shows that you're starting the new year out right by putting on an extremely astounding cover. The story, The Gate to Xoran, is simply amazing. Let's read many more of Mr. Wells' stories. It is far surpassed, however, by The Fifth Dimension Catapult, which is the best story novelette that I have ever read in our magazine. The Boys' Scientification Club is now a branch of the famous Science Correspondence Club. Remember, boys between the ages of 10 and 15, if you're interested in reading science fiction, by all means join the BSC. We have many copies of Astounding Stories in our library, and members are welcome to read them. For further details, write to me, Forrest J. Ackerman, President Librarian, BSC, 530 Staples Avenue, San Francisco, California. Souls and Integrations. Dear Editor, you are starting your second year as editor of Astounding Stories. If your standard during 1931 is up to your standard of 1930, we shall be satisfied. If possible, give us, the readers, the best in science fiction. I have no doubt but that the readers of Astounding Stories would not want fantasy unless written by a master, and to my mind there is only one whom I will forgive for not making his stories science fiction, and that writer is A. Merritt. Every other writer should and must put plausible science in his stories. If he doesn't, he won't go far, not with science fiction readers anyway. I do not agree to your answer by letter to my complaint about the science in the story An Extra Man by Jackson G. You say that two men, each the size and half the weight of the original man, could have been formed from the integrated particles of the original man. In the story, the weight of the two men was exactly the same as that of the original man. Anyway, I do not believe that these two men could have been formed. Most likely, when the laboratories began the process of reintegration, the person integrated would have been cut in half, provided, of course, that the laboratories began the process at the same time. If not, one laboratory would produce a larger portion of an integrated man than the other. But to come back to the original question, can a man be disintegrated into his component atoms and then reintegrated into two men, each half the size, weight, ability, and brains? I say no. I believe that the component atoms of the man, when reintegrated, would be in exactly the same place as they were before the disintegration occurred. If a part, and not the whole of a man, is reintegrated in one place, then the part would be one part of that man and not a complete man in itself. It would be as preposterous and absurd for anything but a part of that man to be reintegrated, as it would be for two apes, pigs, or hens to come from him. I leave out the question of what would happen to the soul. Imagine a soul divided in half. Mr. G. might say that he doesn't believe in souls. Neither do I much. I notice that some readers say that they like that story. One even says that it was perfect. Every man to his taste. I've read worse myself. Anyway, Mr. Editor, Astounding Stories is the finest and best science fiction magazine on the market. Many readers want to keep their magazines and bind them, including myself. Why change the size? I'm certain that that won't be done. Astounding Stories started small, in size only, and it will remain small, also only in size. Let us have reprints. Nathan Greenfeld, 373 Whitlock Avenue, New York City. The Defense Rests. Dear Editor, I have just read the January issue for 1931 and noticed some so-called helpful letters by readers. Looking over Mr. Waite's letter, would like to suggest that he stop to think, if possible, that if he wants absolute bone-dry facts, that he doesn't want fiction at all. And Mr. Johnson, he seems to have the impression that everyone who can take things for granted without having a detailed explanation of the facts of the story is a moron or a small child. He should go find a volume of scientific research if he enjoys that sort of stuff. I read fiction stories for the enjoyment I get out of them and not to criticize them for lack of explanation. I would rather read some of his so-called nonsense than a lot of far-flung, intricate, baseless scientific explanations. Why doesn't Mr. Johnson use his imagination? Donald Call, 360 Selby Avenue, St. Paul, Minnesota. High Time. Dear Editor, I have been reading the magazine ever since it first came out a year ago, so it is high time for me to write. It certainly grows better with every new issue. I think that the 10 best stories published during 1930 were, not in order of merit, Brigands of the Moon, Vandals of the Stars, The Atom Smasher, The Moon Master, Earth the Marauder, The Planet of Dread, Silver Dome, The Second Satellite, Jeddah of the Lowlands, and The Pirate Planet. Your 10 best authors are Harl Vincent, Ray Cummings, Charles W. Diffin, Victor Rousseau, Captain S. P. Meek, Murray Leinster, Arthur J. Burks, R. F. Starzl, Sewell P. Wright, and Edmund Hamilton. The Commander Hanson stories by S. P. Wright are great. Let's have lots more of them. And now about reprints. I cast my vote, like many other readers, in favor of them. Many readers, in fact over half, are new readers of science fiction. They, like myself, have not read the great masterpieces such as The Time Machine, The Moon Pool, and countless other stories. Now why not reprint some of them and give us a chance to read them? A few readers who have read them before do not want them reprinted because they do not want anybody else to read them. A brickbat. Why not cut the edges of the magazine smooth? It would be much easier to handle. A bouquet. You have a fine magazine. Keep up the good stuff. My criticism is exhausted, so goodbye until next time. Oswald Train, P.O. Box 94, Barnesboro, Pennsylvania. 2 dimensions off. Dear Editor, it was just by accident that I came across your magazine, and I have read every issue since. In the January number there is one story that I don't like, The Fifth Dimension Catapult. As far as the story is concerned, it is very good, but Professor Denham was not marooned in the fifth dimension. If you read the story, you will find that Professor Denham was marooned on a three-dimensional world. That is all I can make out. Astounding Stories is the best science fiction magazine I have ever read, and I shall keep on reading it. Keep up the good cover illustrations. Richard Mindle, Route 1, Box 91, Butternut, Wisconsin. To the Colors. Dear Editor, being a passionate admirer of Dr. Brewer and his writings, I cannot permit the contumelious, unfounded aggression of one George K. Addison to go unconfuted. Perceiving that Dr. Brewer cannot possibly vindicate himself against this disparagement, I feel obliged to extenuate Dr. Brewer in the eyes of the readers. In the first place, Dr. Brewer writes rarely and sparingly, and does not grind out his stories month after month, as do some other authors. His stories are highly original and are presented in a purely literary style. The story to which Mr. Addison refers, A Problem in Communication, is a fine example of his work. Should his story be remonstrated because it is lacking in adventure, because it did not delineate mushy love episodes, because it does not cause chills to run down one's spine? Positively not. It lives up to the standard of the highest science fiction. Here is a story unbesmirched by the love element, exceedingly plausible and interestingly narrated. If all stories were thought out and written just half as carefully as Dr. Brewer's, Astounding Stories would become a periodical justified to be considered on a par with the Golden Book. In closing, I wish to express my desire that more stories of the Brewer quality be bestowed upon the readers. Mortimer Weisinger, 266 Van Cortlandt Avenue, Bronx, New York. And it wasn't. Dear Editor, having read The Reader's Corner since its first appearance in Astounding Stories and noted the various criticisms offered, may I tell you about a story written by a science fiction author. The author, by the way, is the perfect author. He makes absolutely no mistakes in his story and is in no danger of starving if his works aren't accepted and older stories are reprinted instead. His science is correct and the story contains nothing that cannot be understood. The story is of interplanetary adventure. Strange to say, there is no war in the story. There is no villain. There is no hero to save a world from destruction or his sweetheart from the monsters of another planet. Instead, there are nothing but characters, if you get what I mean. The persons involved in this interplanetary novel reach their goal due to the tremendous strides of science in experimenting with air and space vehicles. When they arrive on the planet, they do not meet hostile nations. They do not meet monstrosities. They do, however, meet people, much like themselves, who do not welcome the travelers with open arms and show them about their city. but regard them with curiosity and treat them with all due respect for their achievement in conquering space. As I said before, there is no hero who falls in love with the beautiful girl from the planet visited, and saves her and her country from other warring nations. To tell the truth, the adventurers have their own loved ones at home. They meet no intrigue. When they have learned all they can, experiencing many difficulties in mastering the language used, for the people of the planet have not perfected a brain copier or other like mechanism, they arrange for commerce and travel between the two worlds and return to Earth. On their return, they are not met with worldwide ovations and made heroes of, but receive credit for their undertaking and are soon forgotten about. To cap the climax, the story is acceptable to the editors. It is not in need of corrections and is published immediately. The story is gratefully accepted by the public, and not one single soul writes a scathing letter to the editor telling why it was not good. In fact, I can hardly believe that such a story was written. Possibly it wasn't. Robert R. Young, 86 3rd Avenue, Kingston, Pennsylvania. Ha ha! Dear Editor, Christmas Day, and because I'm not acquainted in this city, I'm writing you a letter. I have just finished reading your magazine. I came close to not buying it, being not overly prosperous, but decided to take a chance when I saw you had a dimensional story by Murray Leinster. That story was up to expectations. The others were down to expectations. If you want me to choose your magazine to spend my reading allowance on, have more stories by Leinster, Starzl, Brewer, and Wells. It may take a little more effort, but it's worth it. Sax Rohmer is good on science stuff, too. Before you print any more undersea stories, have a diver look at them. You tell about standing at the bottom of the ocean and seeing the submarine not more than 1/4 of a mile away. Ha ha! No fair, that ha ha. For the story says, quoted exactly, there gleamed the reassuring lights of the Nereid, not 1/4 of a mile away. Probably intense searchlight beams could be seen that far. Editor, you couldn't see it if you stood more than 10 feet away. I'm not trying to be critical, but you should be more careful. Myron Higgins, 524 West 100th Street, New York City. We never will. Dear Editor, I have been an enthusiastic reader of Astounding Stories since it was founded, and I think it about time that I voiced my opinion of your great magazine. Taking all in all, it's a vow, but of course it could be made better by having a quarterly, which I am sure would go over big. Wesso is great, so why not have all the illustrations by him? Your authors are also great. Nearly every story I have read was perfect, and whatever you do, don't lose R.F. Starzl. His ideas are very good, as illustrated in The Planet of Dread. There is only one more thing I would like to ask of you, and that is the reason why I write. Please don't spoil the magazine by endeavoring to please a very small minority by putting in unnecessary scientific explanations. The reason why I like your magazine so much is because of the fact that it is unique in that respect. I have read a few stories in other scientific magazines and found that they contained too much explanation. I hope for the benefit of other readers and myself that you will not change the stories by adding too much explanation. In the coming year, I wish you all possible success. John Sheehan, 32 Elm Street, Cambridge, Massachusetts. This and That. Dear Editor, in the October issue of Astounding Stories, Mr. Woodrow Gelman cast vote number 1 for reprints. In the February 1931 issue, Mr. Forgaris throws in number 2. And here goes number 3. I really don't see why, even after the arguments you printed, you don't print at least one a year. I have been reading your magazine ever since it came out, and have found that at least 1/2 of your readers want reprints. Can't you print at least one for an experiment? Ray Cummings, S. P. Meek, Dr. Miles J. Brewer, Sewell P. Wright, and Harl Vincent are your best authors. Wesso is your best artist by far. There were several stories I did not like. They are Monsters of Moyenne, Earth the Marauder, and I guess those are all. How about giving us some short stories? And how about cutting the edges of the paper smooth? And giving us a quarterly? But all in all, I think your magazine is one of the best in the field. Vernon H. Jones, 1603 6th Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa. It's your imagination. Dear Editor, Well, Astounding Stories was 2 days early this month. See that this happens more often. Of course, The Pirate Planet took first place in the February number. The story was very well written and the characters very realistic. It deserves to be put in book form, also in the talkies. It would be much better than Just Imagine. I welcome Anthony Gilmore, D.W. Hall, and F.V.W. Mason to Astounding Stories. Their stories proved to be very interesting, and I hope to read more. Do you know how to write editorials? Yes? Then prove it. I have to be shown. Write on some scientific subject each month, and every so often write on Astounding Stories itself and of its stories and authors. Is it my imagination, or have you been using a better grade of paper in the past 2 issues? It seems to be much smoother and a little thinner than that used previously. I notice that you are giving more room to some of the illustrations, as in Werewolves of War and The Pirate Planet. The larger the illustrations are, the more there can be put in them. Jack Darrow, 4225 North Spalding Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. If He But Could. Dear Editor, Astounding Stories is without doubt the most preeminent in its field. With such versatile authors as Burks, when does his next story appear? Starzl, Cummings, Leinster, Vincent, and all the rest, how can it help but to overshadow all periodicals? The illustrations are superfine. Wesso is a marvel. If he could only write his own stories and illustrate them. Now a suggestion. I am positive that every reader of your magazine wants you to start a department in which biographies of the authors and their photographs are given. Why not start one? Julia Schwartz, 407 East 183rd Street, Bronx, New York. The Reader's Corner. All readers are extended a sincere and cordial invitation to come over in The Reader's Corner and join in our monthly discussion of stories, authors, scientific principles, and possibilities, everything that's of common interest in connection with our Astounding Stories. Although from time to time the editor may make a comment or so, this is a department primarily for readers, and we want you to make full use of it. Likes, dislikes, criticisms, explanations, roses, brickbats, suggestions. Everything's welcome here, so come over in The Reader's Corner and discuss it with all of us. End of section 25. End of Astounding Stories 16, April 1931, by Various.